Shalom, ברוכים הבאים. I have the honor and the pleasure to interview today one of the giants of modern mathematics, Professor David Kazhdan, who is not just a member of the Israeli Academy of Science, but member of other academies, got a lot of prizes, Israel Prize, recently the Show Prize, etc., etc. But most important is really maybe the last, or at least one of the last universal mathematicians, one of those who know everything about every subject. And this is, I would say, true not just about mathematics. So I can ask David so many questions. But let's start with your family, your childhood. Where you were born? What can you tell us? I think this is an interesting story by itself.
I was born in Moscow in 1946. My parents just came back to Moscow during the war. Then outside of Moscow, they came back. My father at that time was finishing graduate school in history, and my mother also was finishing her university studies. 46, 47 was time of beginning of very strong anti-Semitism in Russia. And with my father, he was almost arrested for being a Jew.
Just for being a Jew, not Zionist.
No, just for being a Jew. He taught in provincial place in Ivanovo, and they organized kind of a group of people declared to be enemies of nation, and they're supposed to be arrested. But one of the enemies of this group found the first party secretary of Ivanovo long ago after revolution was in the wrong party. And he called to him, we can exchange. And they exchanged. He didn't tell anybody that person was in the wrong party. Nobody was arrested, but one person committed suicide before it was clarified. Wow. And my father, he was not arrested, but for 3 years, he was not allowed to teach anywhere and to publish anywhere. So he lived by writing articles by somebody, other people's names, and they pay him money.
Wow.
So
I should tell the audience something which I know, that your father was eventually a world-famous historian of the Crusades, right?
Byzantine
period. And then, but maybe let's move to you. So you were born under this condition. You have a brother or sisters?
No, I am an only child and my parents are only children. So I really did not have anybody outside of the immediate family. We lived with my grandmother and grandfather. My father
lived with them?
Yeah, my father for next 10 years essentially worked outside of Moscow. My mother with me lived by his parents.
Wow. And which school did you go? As elementary school, high school?
In elementary school and high school, I went to school. The only important thing was it was number 125, 5 cube.
What?
Number was 125, 5 cube.
Yeah, but what do you mean?
Nothing else.
Oh, you learned nothing there, you mean?
No. It was a very nice atmosphere in the school. Mm-hmm. One thing what happens when I was in the 4th grade, some kid from a 5th grade started telling me dirty Jew, and my class had beaten him up. I didn't have any other problem with anti-Semitism from my school years. School was very good for me, and somewhere when I was in grade 5, I told my parents that I don't want to go to school every day, it's too much. Find a way for me one day to stay home and to read.
To read?
Yeah. I say, fine, but you have to choose something important to do. That's I'll play chess. They say, fine. For half a year, I was seriously playing chess. But then they say playing chess is not important enough. Choose something else. So they're doing mathematics. I was very lucky. My grandfather, who never finished high school, he kind of finished elementary school, studied with me mathematics. We together.
You mean he was your mentor? Or
No.
he really studied
We
with you?
studied
He
together.
also was interested.
We studied together. So he got a PhD in chemistry, but he didn't know mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
And so we learned school mathematics in half a year or a year. And but it was very helpful. I remember sitting with him. I wasn't alone. School kind of accepted my not going to classes. I could come.
So you stopped to go at all?
No, I went when I was lonely. I would come to class. But they didn't bother me at all.
This was still in elementary school like
So,
that?
yes.
And what happened in the high school?
In the high school, essentially the same. The school in Russia, when I started, was 10 years. And in some moment, they decided to extend it for 11 years. And I was the first class to study 11 years. I decided it's better I study 9 years than 11 years. Mm-hmm. So I went to principal and asked permission to jump over a class. He says no. But I was Russian. In 2 weeks I came to him and asked, could I jump over 2 classes? He says no, only over 1. And then in school I set up, I'll come first week. I tell every teacher you know everything. Give me exam. And they give me exam. And I was free from school for a year.
Actually, I'm not surprised because you are well known for knowing everything.
No, you don't have to
started
know.
then. So you started to go to the university?
I started to work in
college, or
the
you
club.
learned by yourself?
When there was a very nice thing. Students at the university run mathematics circles. And I went to mathematics circles.
At the university?
At the university.
But this for high school kids?
Yeah, there was for 8th grade school. I was in 6th grade. But I went there, and I remember first problem they asked me. I was completely shocked. I solved it, but shocked that such problem could exist. The problem was to prove that if you have a prime number p bigger than 3, then p squared minus 2 is divisible by 24. Prime numbers I knew, divisible I knew, but there were different compartments of my head. The fact that I really belonged together was striking.
And the notion of a proof, you were already been familiar?
Kind of, yeah.
I know.
It was natural. So for a year I went to this math circle. Then there was Olympiad, Moscow Olympiad. I got first prize. During this year, I was collecting...
First, you mean you got... This was a local of Moscow, Russia, or the international
local
one?
Moscow.
Just
local
Moscow?
Mm-hmm. During the year, I was buying mathematics book at second-hand bookstores. Mm-hmm. And I met there Naum Yakovlevich Vilenkin. You must probably know the name. We often met there. And once, when I came there, he said, Gelfand wants to see me.
Gelfand?
Wants to see me.
To see you?
Yeah, because Gelfand decided to teach his son, Serezha. And he wanted to find...
Which son of him?
Sergey. Yeah.
Sergey.
Yeah.
Maybe I should explain the audience. Gelfand is kind of the legendary mathematician of those periods in Moscow. He was kind of the godfather of many. We'll talk about him more. And Sergey, his son, indeed also became a mathematician. He's at Rutgers University, I believe.
No. He's AMS. He actually
worked for MS.
He only for MS. So Gelfand decided to teach his son. He decided to find couple of kids talk about me, since I got first prize. Somebody got second prize. But second prize, Ramilzik and Gerov dropped it. But with Serozha, for many years, I'll come once a week to Gelfand.
How old were you at that time?
12?
12?
No,
And
13.
Wow.
12 and 13.
Uh-huh.
And he will teach us. And in particular, in some of these situations, we even published some paper in Доклade of mathematical science. Some differential equations, something.
At the age of 12, 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was very useful. It was extremely useful because when I jumped over a class, the only teacher which demanded that I'll come to her class was teacher of mathematics. And I came somewhat. And sometimes she was telling that there is every number can be written as a product of prime numbers, but uniqueness of decomposition is impossible to prove. I raised my hand and asked, do you want me to prove? She said yes. So I gave proof.
She said that it's impossible to prove it, or it's not impossible for the class.
So she said, you don't have to come to my class. Fine.
Okay.
So in the end of the year, I get 3 zeros in 3 mathematical subjects: algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. And if you have 3 zeros, you have to stay for the second year. You don't have re-examination. But at the same time, to publish a paper in Doklade, you need a letter from my place of work. So I came to my principal, get a letter. So
you were not good enough to be a student in the elementary high school, but you were good enough to publish scientific papers.
The problem was resolved.
And so I guess this is your first meeting with Gelfand, which became to.
Gelfand I met 2 years before. I was 12. This was for 14. It was 2 years later. Gelfand I met before I jumped over class, but Gelfand I met regularly every week.
Because of his son.
Yes, but
I meant that what. But then, did you go? When did you go to a regular university studies?
No, after I finished
high school,
I went to university, but I was reduced not to go to any class. So I didn't go to any class.
You didn't go to any class, okay. But you came to the exams?
No.
Even not to the exams?
No.
So how did you get?
Because I already knew people who give exams. I say, you give me 5. You give me 10, what's the maximum? Don't bother.
So who told?
I went to Arnold.
Yeah, Arnold was also involved. Yeah, Arnold was also, to explain, one of the greatest mathematicians.
So he started asking me questions. I said, you do to ask more precise questions. I say, Dima, enough?
We should tell, I call you David, but Dima is your...
We were skiing together, hiking together. I was in this group of people who give exams. As an example of this, when my wife gave birth to our first child, on this day she get A in some exam by Margulis. She didn't go to exam. No, we were graduate school, so.
So there's something which I really want to ask you. I remember seeing a photo of you, Grisha Margulis, and Katok, Tulia Katok. I have to mention, of course, for the audience, that all 3 of you became world famous mathematicians at that age, and you were there. You look like maybe 15 or something. You were friends at that time, and you went to the same kind of circle. And your kind of mentor was Gelfand.
Gelfand was very good in sending me to other people. I talked to him once a week. We even did some work together. But essentially, his feeling was that I should go to learn from Manin, from Novikov, from Arnold. So I went to many, many different seminars. So my main kind of education was from different seminars, different people.
Officially, who was your thesis advisor?
Officially, thesis advisor, since Gelfand didn't work at Moscow University, he was thrown out in a time of anti-Semitism in 1948. He ran a seminar, but he was not on the staff. Gelfand.
Really?
Yes, but he was not on the staff of Moscow University. So my former advisor was Kirillov.
Kirillov, I see. Now, there are so many stories of these legendary seminars of Gelfand that they started in the afternoon. They could go as long as 10.
Seminars were a very definite structure. They're supposed to start at 6.
At
6
p.m.
They never started before 7:30. Everybody knew this. People came at 6 from different parts of Moscow to meet and to talk. So seminar, first of all, served the meeting place.
Very important.
The second thing was
without internet and communication.
Was in 10 years that I won there, Gelfand every time would say what will be next time. It never was, not once, or almost not once, when he said. It's find something else.
But just a second. At 7:30, what happened?
Gelfand will come, doors will open, will come to sit, and somebody will give a talk.
Somebody local, outside?
Mostly local. Sometimes go from outside, but mostly it's local people.
I remember a story which I thought was a brilliant idea of Gelfand. Marie Franz Wienerhals told me that she once came to give a talk. Maybe it was after your time.
After my time.
What?
After my time.
But she was to give a talk in his seminar in the evening. He invited her to his office, and there were some of the kids, young, brilliant students like you at the time and others. And he asked her, what do you want to talk about tonight? She started to explain on the blackboard. Okay, she talked with him for 2 hours, and we'll meet in the evening. In the evening, when she came to the seminar, she assumed that she would be the one to give the talk. But he told her, no, you'll sit down, and these students, they would give a talk. If they miss something, she would help them.
This is unusual.
That's unusual. I thought that it's a great idea to keep the knowledge in Moscow.
The kind of what was represented. Manin came back from France in 1968. He learned from Grothendieck, and he gave a course on algebraic geometry. He wanted to start with a scheme, something, but Gelfand said, no, you start with what's ideal, what is this, what's ring. After 6 lectures, Manin came to schemes. Gelfand said, enough.
What do you mean enough?
So, enough. You told us enough about algebraic geometry.
Oh, I see. And
he wanted that people understand basics. This was his always approach to mathematics, that you should understand some simple basic things, not complicated constructions. And some people who give lectures on his seminars suffered because they present something and they found saying in blackboard they don't understand basic things they're talking about. But it was very good education for kind of looking for simple basic things.
May I ask, it's clear that at that time there will be a good number of outstanding Jews, young Jewish boys who became outstanding mathematicians. Do you have an explanation how this happened? Why did this happen? Is it possible that this is just because you and your generation as Jews could not do other things. You were not able to go to be a lawyer.
No, but
And
but you
mathematics
can
is a
ask about
subject.
ask about previous generation. Jews also could not become lawyers. No, I don't know what happened. You see, the problem, much I think greater scale, was in Hungary, 100 years ago. Number of Hungary intellectuals from Neumann and many came from Hungary.
Mm-hmm.
Great people in different areas, in music. Nobody knows why. Why suddenly in Vienna?
Suddenly there was such a boost of...
It's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
But Moscow University was good place with broad education, with number of very capable mathematicians, and sometimes outstanding. Arnold, for example, I tell you a story which hard for me to believe. Somewhere was some problem, and I decided I solved the problem. I came to Arnold, it was in his area, dynamical systems, and he found a mistake. I came second time, I found a mistake. I came 20th time, and he found a mistake. I came 21st time, and he didn't find a mistake. But he was ready to listen 21 times. Quasi-proof of the same result.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people who really ready to listen.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like really an amazing intellectual...
yes.
But still, do you have any explanation why it happened there? And
I'm not sure there's such big difference between this generation and next generation. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has to know.
Is there an historical, somebody studied this period? It's a great subject, I think, to study intellectual history.
It's definitely very interesting. And it's also very interesting that there's a lot of non-mathematical cultural discussions, both at university, the group of university. Most of when we meet, we don't talk about mathematics.
You didn't talk about mathematics?
When we drink, no.
Uh-huh. Interesting. But about...
culture was on the table.
Mm-hmm. So that's an opportunity to ask you another question. I guess that the family you grew up were not Orthodox. They were Jewish in a strong way?
No. I remember when I was around 4, time of anti-Semitism, I walked from a yard and somebody shouting, "Hey, you Jew." And I said, "No, you are Jew." I knew it's something bad, but they didn't have any idea that it had anything to do with me. Mm-hmm. No, my parents were not involved. I didn't know about Jewish customs until I started reading Feuchtwanger in the age 14. I just didn't know about any Jewish custom.
Until you started
reading Feuchtwanger, Leon Feuchtwanger. There's a German writer.
Uh-huh. So you didn't have bar mitzvah, for example?
No. I didn't know.
You didn't know even the notion?
I didn't know the notion Pesach exists.
What is Pesach?
Shabbat is a special day. There's no idea until I was 16, 17.
What got you to be interested?
Reading books.
Just from books, not any specific person? Or?
One of my very close friends, actual Jew, became Christian. And then he became a priest.
You mean he was Jewish?
Jewish, yes.
Who converted to Christianity, he became a priest, and he was the one who...
No. His example was an example that one could take religious seriously.
Uh-huh.
Until that time, I thought the religious does not exist in our generation. Just nothing to look in this direction. His example kind of told me that no. He was very clever. No, maybe it's something to think about. And then I read Torah, translation.
So but you decided that if you want to be interested in religion, let's start with your own Jewish. Why didn't you go to Christianity?
I don't know. No, I don't. It's a good question. I don't want really to go into this. It's not a story I understand. But in some moment, I decided I want to learn and observe. I was kind of immediately after we married with Helena. When we married, I didn't observe anything. In a couple of weeks, I started observing something.
So, what? When you
married Helena,
yeah,
I didn't observe anything. But in a couple of weeks after this, I started observing something. It's kind of
not by your influence.
No, not at all.
Uh-huh.
Not at all. But
what age did you get married?
22.
22. Mm-hmm. Elena was a classmate. How did you meet
No,
her?
I met. She was 2 years. She was my age, therefore 2 years younger at university. We met on the music. I have a friend who every week will put some kind of that time new music like Schoenberg, Berg, and we met on this
type of event. And now the fact that you both were Jewish was kind of accidental. It played no role, or
we at least for
or
me,
it made you together because of anti-Semitism.
No. I didn't feel anti-Semitism on my skin at all. And that time when we met Helena, Jewishness didn't mean anything. But slowly we started going to synagogue of Simchat Torah or something like this. Mostly around the synagogue on Simchat Torah.
Simchat Torah, right? That was a very well known.
But kind of staying outside. But that came later.
Mm-hmm. What was the reaction of your peers, especially the mathematician? They thought you got nuts, you got crazy, or they respected it?
No, okay. It was more difficult in my family than in my friends. In my friends, girlfriend who not knew, whom I openly told this, was very positive.
He was very positive.
Yeah, his father was religious Jew. And it was very positive. He was very positive. Other people ignored it completely.
It's an opportunity to me to mention that I remember that when Gelfand passed away, you said Kaddish, I believe, for a full year?
No. I said Kaddish there. I didn't say Kaddish for the full year. I said Kaddish in Sema. He was buried on Jewish cemetery. And I said Kaddish there.
But I remember that once you asked me to say Kaddish instead of you because you were away. Maybe it was Yom HaShanah, memorial.
Maybe it was yours.
Okay.
But other people, nobody talked to me about this. People, many probably knew, but kind of never.
But after a while, like you started to go with a kippah or not in Moscow?
Not. Okay, outside I walk in beret, like Silvan.
Beret, yeah.
And at university I walk without kippah.
So you mean this by itself was not?
No, I didn't. I walk to synagogue every morning. But
every morning?
Yeah. But,
wow.
But nobody knew this. That's kind of.
No, this was kind of a fast.
No, took some years, but. Last 2 years I walk to synagogue every morning.
Okay, let's go a little bit for mathematics, and I'll start with a little introduction. The kind of you became extremely famous when you define what is now called Kazhdan property T. How old you were at that time?
As I can tell you. I was exactly 20 years old. It was during the Congress.
During the International Congress in Moscow?
I can tell you how it happened. I was playing ping pong with a tia.
With a tia?
Yes. And in some moment, I had an idea, hitting a ball. I was hitting a ball and had an idea with him.
So that's a good advice to the young generation to play ping pong to get the idea.
Высоте.
Maybe I should explain the audience that Kazhdan property is kind of a property in representation theory. We'll hear a little bit about it, I hope, soon. But the main application of it at that time, nowadays it has awfully a lot of application, was to solve two long-standing conjecture of Selberg, which was a great mathematician of that generation, on discrete subgroup of Lie groups. This came as out of the blue. I mean, it was so original. Nowadays, we understand it so much better. It looks natural. But at that time, it was completely out of the blue. It was kind of such an original idea to use representation theory to prove some discrete groups, geometrical properties. So how did you think about that?
It came, I was...
Now I know when you thought about it. But
Actually, as often happens, I had a contradiction in mathematics.
You have?
A contradiction in mathematics. I was able to prove that subgroup SL to R, quotient by commutator, is finite, which is false.
Yeah, of course.
But I was able to prove it.
You were able to prove it, okay.
And I realized where the gap in my proof is I used somewhere that unitary trivial representation is not in the closure of other unitary representation. The moment I realized source of my mistake,
this brought you interesting. So mistake is not such a bad idea.
Mistake is a good idea.
In life, right. So Kazhdan property T is, on the face of it, is a very abstract property representation theory. Nowadays is everywhere. I have to admit that it had a huge influence on me, and much of my work is related to that. It had applications in combinatorics and computer science, etc., etc. Maybe we will not try to explain the listener what is Kazhdan property T, but maybe you can explain what is representation theory. How do you think about, how do you see representation theory?
There are two parts there. We kind of, notion of group appears very natural. You consider symmetry. You have a symmetry, you can combine symmetry, you can take reflection this, reflection that. So groups appear as symmetry. What very important thing is that there are apparent symmetries, something you look and you see symmetry. But often there are hidden symmetries, something you don't see immediately. You have to restructure thing to see the symmetry. And one approach in seeing and using this symmetry is kind of linearization. To see how your group acting on the vector space. And this is theory of representation. It really combines these two approaches. One is looking for a symmetry when you don't see it immediately. And then second, you analyze this symmetry by studying how the group is acting.
How it's acting somewhere else.
Somewhere else.
You mean there are symmetries of somebody, like you take the sphere and it has many symmetries, you rotate it here like that. This form an algebraic notion which called the group, which is kind of an abstract. And now you say, let's think about how this group can act, not on the sphere, but somewhere else.
On the function of the sphere.
On the
function of the sphere.
On the function of the sphere or something like that. But at the kind of philosophical level, we know now that representation theory is so important in physics, in chemistry, in other branches of mathematics. It's more or less everywhere. Why is that? Or how do you see
No,
this?
But because in every case when you find the symmetry, it really simplifies very much whole picture. And kind of it unifies, simplifies the whole picture. Things which seems to be completely unrelated acquire meaning. Or kind of this monster group appears. You have some function, you have some coefficients. They look very strange.
Yeah.
But they're dimensions of representation of some very large group. The moment you see it, these coefficients acquire some unity, which you cannot even express without looking for the symmetry. After people absorb there is relation between coefficients and dimension representation, took some years to see how symmetry works. It was not at all obvious.
Yeah, maybe I should elaborate for the people who are not familiar with this. What David is hinting is about the moonshine, what is called now, which somebody observed at some point that a dimension of some representation, which is a long number, I forgot how many digits.
The first one has 7 digits.
70 digit is equal to a number which appears in a completely different subject.
Yeah.
And he asked, this can be accidental? And for a number of years, people look what's the connection, and eventually they found and explained, and this opened up a big connection between. Right. That's and of course what I mentioned before, that your solution, but what is called today Kazhdan property theory, representation theory, is such a useful tool in many other directions. Okay, let's continue a little bit with your life story, which can be really a good movie can be made out of it. So you were a Russian, you became very, very well known, even though you couldn't get out from Russia for visits.
I went to Hungary once.
They enabled you to go to Hungary?
Yeah.
Oh, Hungary was still under the Russians, so they were not afraid.
I met Mosto
in Hungary. Mosto, I should explain, was a very important professor at Yale at the time, and on this subject of discrete subgroups of Lie group, he was one of the greatest people. But at that time, you could go only to those, I guess, you and your friends, only to those countries which were safe.
I went only once.
Only once. Well, that's interesting to tell to the younger generation these days. Before they prove any theorem, they already get grants to fly to conferences all around the world. So when did you decide that you want to leave the USSR?
No, we decided in 72, but by family reasons postponed it for 3 years.
So, your parents wanted also to leave?
No, my parents didn't want to leave. They were sure they would stay. But after I left, my mother lost her job. Formally, she became 55, so she could be naturally retired. She was retired. My father was told he'll never travel abroad. And so in another 2 years, they decided to leave. But the moment I left, they planned to stay.
Now, when your father moved to America, how old was he?
He was 56. 56.
56?
Yes.
Not at all. I see. So, because I know that he got a position in one of the most prestigious institutes.
It's not a simple story, but kind of people in Russia did not understand that professor position could be temporary. Such notion did not exist. So when he was offered 3 years position in Dumbarton, completely ignored the statement 3 years. It was clear this for life. When he came there, he found the 3 years will soon pass by. I kind of did good work, and the person who was in charge of the Orthodox respected him much, and he never had permanent position, but it was indefinitely prolonged.
Okay. Now, how old were you when you moved out from?
29.
29, and then you got right away a position at Harvard.
I got temporary position.
It was temporary?
Yeah, I asked for a visiting position, and I got a visiting position.
For how long?
I got it for a year. I stayed a year and a half. Kind of did not produce any work. In this year and a half, I did not produce one.
Why? What happened?
Why, I don't know. I talked to people, but I was now post-factum very impressed with Harvard. They gave me full professorship.
Right. Even though you did.
Without me producing one.
Okay.
And I remember then when afterwards, it was clearly due to the impression of Tate and Mazur, with whom I talked a lot. Because I remember that when I did first work already, Tate said, "Oh, I'm very glad you did the work." If I'll never do work, it will be considered completely wrong.
Maybe it's opportunity to check with you because it's a kind of I don't know if a legend or not, that was told about you at those days that you came from Moscow and by mistake they gave you your salary 1/10 of what they were supposed to give you, and you didn't know what salaries, you didn't know anything, and you were happy.
No. There is a part of truth on this, but the following. They offered me salary $20,000 a year. I translated, being in Russia, in what it means in Russia, and I find I will get a great salary. When I came to the United States, I got this $20,000, but I found that it's not a great salary.
Okay.
So this is what is true.
That's the origin of that. And you stayed in Harvard for
27 years.
What?
27
years. Was that?
From 75 to 2002.
Wow. I remember when you visited Israel for the first time. I was hiking.
We went hiking with Hillel.
Yeah, we went hiking. Yeah, I should tell the people why did we go hiking together with Hillel Fürstenberg? Because you came and I worked on some problem and I wanted to ask your advice. You know, you were such a famous mathematician and everyone said I must talk with you, but you were so busy. Everyone wanted to talk with you. Hillel took you to hiking in the Judea desert, and Hillel told me, "Why don't you join us on the way? You will that." What I remember that the problem I worked for a long time. I tried one pattern and failed. I tried another pattern and failed. I tried to talk with you. You right away suggested me the first pattern, but took me a few months. But I kind of believe you because I thought, if the big Kazhdan said, but I knew where it's going to be
stuck.
And then I asked, I listened, and then that I asked, and then you admitted it's stuck. And then we tried, and then you went to the second one. It starts. Eventually, we didn't solve the problem. No. But I came to myself, I remember I came home, and I said, I maybe should drop out of mathematics. What I worked for 6 months took you half an hour, more or less, to see all the pattern. Well, over the years, I saw that even people like me can find that. And I have to, of course, tell people that over the years became friends, we even have joint papers, and it was a great honor and pleasure to work with you. Okay, back to Boston. You were there for 27 years. What I found surprisingly that you talk with so many people, everyone come to you to ask your advice, but somehow the list of your formal students
very small.
Is no or very small?
No, there's not no. One of them was Lubotzky.
Lubozki, right. Lubozki also became a world-famous mathematician. He got the
But
Fields
also,
Medal.
I had Savid. I had some small number of good students. But kind of the problem was that I never can find for student a problem. I simply cannot, because either I see how to solve it, or they don't have any idea how to solve it.
I see.
And I
just cannot suggest the
I cannot suggest problems.
Uh-huh. Or maybe they are
so
afraid.
People,
maybe they are afraid
no,
from you because.
Well, people who were good enough to have their own problems could.
They don't. Uh-huh. Okay, so let's move ahead. And then you were there for 27 years. And then what year did you move to Israel?
I moved first for 1 year sabbatical. So I don't know how to count it. It was 2001. And then I stayed.
You stayed? You even didn't go back to stay?
No, I averaged with university that I don't have to come back.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing which interests me, but maybe I should give a little introduction. Ever since you came, you run every Sunday.
Almost immediately.
What?
Maybe in a year or two, but very soon.
Very soon. Every Sunday.
I found, now it is not so relevant, but I found strange that in Israel, people working in different universities don't interact much. So I decided to write seminars, which take place once a week, with 2 or 3 seminars. So people would come from different universities, a bit together. And this worked for some years.
Well, it works amazingly. You are kind of magnet. We bring so many people to Jerusalem every week. And for so many years, became like famous seminars. I wonder, do you have the Gelfand seminar as a role model for that in some sense, or it's not really?
No, it was very different structure. Gelfand seminar was every week, essentially, something new. I run courses. I don't run.
So every week a different
subject.
Different subject could be anything in mathematics.
Yeah. I would run courses. It means for half a year would be one subject. It's very different structure.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't model.
And now there is what is really so impressive, that your moving to Jerusalem really made a difference. It's so rarely that one person arrived to a department and it made such a huge impact on the department. And certainly, once you come to Israel and once you come to the Hebrew University, in Hebrew we say, Tzadik bal ha'ir, it's called רישומו ניכר, עושה רושם. Are you happy in Jerusalem mathematically? I understand you came for a large extent because of your children and grandchildren.
It's part of it. I'm happy. Definitely, mathematics department behave incredibly well in my case. I did not learn how to read handwritten Hebrew until now. So I didn't check any exams. And I survived teaching and not checking even one exam. So the university really helped. And I worked with a number of people at university. It was with Warszawski, with Tami.
And people coming from abroad to work with you.
Yeah.
Let me go back to moving to Israel. You moved to Israel, as we said, it was fantastic. Meanwhile, 2 of your children are here and 2 are in the United States. You have grandchildren here.
Yeah,
and I know your family. I know you are happy with having the grandchildren around. And then we're coming to the accident that you had. How many years ago was that?
A little bit. It's will be 10 years after I get out of hospital. It was 10.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell the listener from my side, I was in the United States, and then the rumor crashed that Kazhdan was in a car accident. Well, you drove your bicycle with your son, Lee, and truck hit you. And you were, I understand that you were, at least what we were told over there, that you...
Yeah, it was not clear.
Was very, very few chances that you will survive. I think they even brought your mother, who was alive at that time.
My mother lived in Jerusalem.
Right, but they brought her to...
Most probably, yeah, to say... I don't remember. For first
of course you can't remember.
The first 9 days I was in coma.
You were in coma, right.
So I don't have any idea.
There are two things which I remember, and they are kind of interesting. One, that at that time, Eli told me that, or that's what he didn't have to tell me, because you were such a sportsman and riding that morning, you rode with him the bicycle to Bet Shemesh, I believe, and back.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, I mean, I should explain to the listener that you used to climb mountains.
No, I walked.
Not in Israel. Walk mountains.
I never climbed.
But walk to high mountains. Not climbing. But
no, I'm not climbing.
I remember that some years ago you offered me to join you in the summer to go to that. And even though you are 10 years older than me, I was afraid because you were in such a good shape that I couldn't really do it. But I was told that on one end you were eaten because you are kind of small, but this also saved your life because your muscles were so strong that there is truth in that? Or is one of the legends?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
This kind of thing is not a legend. It's opinion.
Is what?
It's opinion.
And if I remember also correctly, they tried on you a new drug which was not yet approved.
Not yet approved. There was a very good physician. It's usually my name, who developed some kind of drug which was not considered to be applied because it worked sometimes and sometimes did not work, many times didn't work. But my situation was so bad that people did not afraid to try this drug.
There was nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. This is true.
And this was like a miracle that you survived and you work. I remember coming to visit you in the hospital. I tried to ask you, how are you? At that time we worked on our paper, how are you doing? I have to say, you were a little bit impatient to answer that, and right away you wanted to work. And what is amazing that ever since then you continue to work like crazy. You publish so many papers, so much activity, even though you are now...
Opposite. I don't spend time hiking.
Oh no, you do hike. I mean, I don't know if people see in your crutches. You walk with crutches, but you walk from your home to the university. Yes. This is your sport to do. And which is like 5 kilometers or
3.
What?
3.
Only 3, but
okay, no,
it's unbelievable. I must tell you, David, that we all admired you even before, but we admire you not just as a mathematician, but also as a person, and you're such a strong will and strong desire to do the best in everything is unbelievable. We are getting to the end, and I cannot finish without mentioning that your interest in so many other things. In fact, a friend of mine told me that you spend so much time in the National Library in the Not now, but before that, right? Now you bring home everything that nobody would guess that you're a mathematician. Everyone would think that you are a historian or a Jewish studies scholar or something like that.
It's exaggeration.
Exaggeration.
If I spend 1 hour every second day in library, it would be good enough. And that's exaggeration.
No, but I remember you told me on those days that mathematics you do in the office, but once you go home, you learn other things.
True. But not
It's true for you, you know. I mean, I can, but true for myself, I cannot stop to do mathematics. I hate this.
At least
I don't know how you do it.
now it's different, but in Boston, when kids were growing, I come home, there'll be no mathematics.
No mathematics. That's great. That's great. Well, you are great in many different ways. Okay, we have to finish. What can we... מה אברך לו במה יבורך, as the song say. We wish you many more years of healthy and fruitful and happiness. And we are so happy and proud that you came to be with us. This was such a huge contribution to the State of Israel and to the Hebrew University. Thank you very much.
I'm very happy that we moved here.
In all aspects, including mathematics. That's wonderful to hear.
Mathematics.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much.
Thanks.